Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Litter Media Live. I'm Mike Smith, your host, and joining us today for the monthly visit is Mayor Luke Feeney from the city of Chillicothe. Luke's going to be with us to talk about various issues here in the city of Chillicothe in just a moment. Our interview today brought to you by Adina Health. Back after this.
Mark came to the Adina Orthopedic and Spine Institute in severe arm pain from a degenerative disc. Minimally invasive spinal surgery got him back to what matters most. At Adina, we do what we love, so you can too.
Back with Chillicothe Mayor Luke Feeney. Mayor, as we are doing this interview live, it has rained this morning. How about that?
It's rain, that unfamiliar sight in the sky.
What is that stuff? Yeah. The question comes up, of course, the state of Ohio, USDA put out a drought. We're in a drought area here. There was a open burn ban, which, of course, if you live in the city of Chillicothe, you're not supposed to be open burning anyway. But they followed that up later with not an order, but an advisory to conserve water. What is our status here in Chillicothe right now concerning water conservation, if any?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the city itself is under no water conservation restrictions. I have seen posts recently. I think it was Hillsborough maybe had some restrictions. What it comes down to ultimately is the source of your water. And our water sources, despite the drought, essentially wells get into a lower base level there. We have no issues. We've had no issues producing clean water. So from not only from a water source standpoint, from a production capacity standpoint, we're good on both sides.
I know there's been stories for many years about the Taze River aquifer, and we've got an unlimited supply. You wouldn't have probably been in town at that point, but back in the 80s, I'm pretty sure it was the late 80s, we had a drought, and the city of Chillicothe did have a ban on watering lawns and things like that. So even with that source at that time, maybe we couldn't pump it fast enough or whatever, but back in those days, that did come up.
Yeah, it's. I can't speak to that situation, but what I can tell you is that over time, the city has had a different amount of wells. And so, in fact, we have it planned right now, and most of them are in the city park. Mm-hmm. You can probably picture one. There's by the pump house. Yep. There's a couple different areas. There's one sort of around the corner from the pump house there, but it can be a factor of how many wells do you have, and what does the flow from those wells look like? Because as a well gets older, it might have a restricted flow or less flow. You can rehab a well, mm-hmm. Or you can dig a new one. So it could have been any combination of issues, but I'm certain that the drought itself was the predominant issue then.
Staying on the environment, about recycling, and what brought this to my attention, CBS did a report about a month ago. Houston, Texas had like millions of pounds of recyclable material set aside for recycling that ended up in their landfill. Palo Alto, California, there was something like 60% of their recycling was being shipped to Asia, and they don't even know what it's being used for. How do we know? And I'm not insinuating Chillicothe is doing anything like that. I've heard nothing about that. But is there some kind of accountability that we know that the things that we say, hey, this is to be recycled, is being recycled?
Sure. So when we went to the curbside recycling program 6 or so years ago now, one of the things that part of the team did was actually tour the facility, Rumpke mm-hmm. facility. And for those who've been around a while, they'll know that the city of Chillicothe used to have its own landfill. Right. And we still are required by the EPA to monitor that landfill. So anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 a year, we are paying to make sure nothing in that landfill is leaking into the environment. But what we have now is what's called a transfer station. So our essentially recycling or trash is taken to the transfer station, depending on who our supplier is that year. We bid out both trash and recycling services. And so it's taken to the transfer station and then transferred, if it's recycling, to the recycling facility in Columbus, and if it's trash, to wherever that trash is being hauled currently. But there's no landfills in the city of Chillicothe. From there, Rumpke itself, we don't get like a end user report, but we've seen the facility and know, and actually we get reports on how clean our recycling is, for lack of a better way of saying it, which is essentially our community not contaminating their recycling with, a big plastic bag of trash in it. And the people who pick up the recycling inspect for that too, and they'll set it out or make you do it again. But in terms of end user, I think that'd be a good question for us to pass on to Rumpke to figure out, ultimately where are these materials after they're sorted, because there's a lot of time and energy that goes into making sure that it's not mixed. Where it ends up from there, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was amazed at the story about Houston, and it's like, oops, we caught you. So, and I'm sure if it happens once or twice in different cities, it's probably unfortunately happening. But yeah, all that effort and the money that you guys lay out. I think we touched last month on the fact that the city of Chillicothe just had an increase in refuge collection. Is some of that based not only on what you have to pay in wages, but is some of that based on who you're having to pick that stuff up?
Absolutely. So I think we're on a 3-year cycle for trash bidding and recycling bidding. And when that cycle ends, we get bids back in for essentially the cost that we will be charged per ton to accept trash. And so oftentimes it'll be the same hauler or company that will get the recycling and the trash, but sometimes it's been split out. And I think one of the biggest factors there is the cost of gasoline, right? Because most of what's happening there is the trash is being hauled from a transfer station to wherever that dump is, or the landfill. And so the farther they have to go, the more it's going to cost us. And so every so many years, and that's really what happened with recycling early on. Over the past 8 or so years, the commodities market has changed quite a bit. So recycling went from being cheaper than trash to more expensive than trash. But at the same time, I think we are sending out the calendar, the blue and red schedule for recycling here pretty soon. And it'll have a note on it that for the past, I think 6 consecutive years now, the community has recycled over 3 tons per day. So there's a significant amount of recycling happening. Right. And there's a value add to the fact that it's not going to a landfill. And I think people over time just become more and more aware if they throw away this plastic, whatever, it just sits in the landfill forever. Whereas the recycling, as long as it's not apparently used in Texas, goes to a better use again.
Of course, we're just now wrapping up September as we're doing this interview, but it won't be long before leaf collection. Any idea on when that might be kicking up?
So I announced that last night at City Council. I think it's the 15th of October that it starts, and it follows the same progression as our large item pickup, which is if your trash pickup day is Monday, then you are the first week of leaf pickup. If your trash week is Tuesday, then you're the second week. And we go through it twice. So there's 10 weeks of leaf pickup. We also recognize that the weather doesn't necessarily follow the trash pickup schedule. So if anybody watching this needs leaf pickup outside of their schedule, they can call in. We can't promise same day, but we'll try to get to you because we know that trees don't fall on Monday trash pickup differently than they fall on Tuesday trash pickup. So we'll try and stay on top of it. And this year, I would expect, with as dry as it's been, we'll have leaves coming down a lot earlier.
In fact, I saw somebody in another town. It wasn't in Chillicothe. They were just blowing their leaves out into the street. That's not the process
not
in Chillicothe.
A good idea. No, and one of the biggest reasons not to do that, there's 2 big ones, but one of them is when you do that, you the streets are set up as storm sewer drains, right? And you block the curb and gutter. But the other thing that I think many people don't think about, and City Council even passed a law several years ago, is people on motorcycles or bicycles that can cause pretty dangerous conditions. And so it's a safety thing and just a strictly a drainage thing.
Talking earlier about the way costs have gone up, of course, the city of Chillicothe doesn't typically have to go to the grocery store and buy milk and eggs. So where is a lot of the biggest price spikes that a municipality would often see?
Yeah, the biggest one, which is always our biggest factor, is wages. We have 3 bargaining units: police, fire, and AFSCME, which is kind of a collection of the other employees. And we are just wrapping up the third of 3 negotiations. And so with cost of living, inflation, all those things, wages, we're able to look at statewide trends and kind of know where we should land. So that is the single biggest expense for the city. We pay people to do services for the community. Beyond that, it seems to me that utilities, gas and electric, I don't know if that's directly related to the economy or if that's more energy regulation type of thing, but we've seen an uptick in energy. And then beyond that, some departments have felt hits on certain supplies that they go through a lot, that sort of thing. But for us, it's definitely wages, and I think utilities would be second.
I was talking with, was out of the eye doctor yesterday, and he was talking about how difficult it is for them to have contact lenses brought in. Has the city of Chillicothe seen any improvement in the things that you need to buy or order in relation to the problems we were having with our supply chain?
Yeah, that's a good question. So day-to-day operations, we're not seeing any significant issues. Where we are seeing significant issues, in particular, is the wastewater treatment plant, because they will be waiting on some components for, I think the latest I heard was something like 12 to 18 months. Mm-hmm. So a project that originally may have been wrapping up this time next year or early 26 is going to be pushed out a fair bit longer. And that's more complicated stuff. I imagine it's supply chain issues that might be more similar to something a Kenworth would see than a supply chain issue than contact lenses or masks or something like more complicated electronic equipment.
I know that as the winter approaches, and maybe you've already done this, where you get salt that's brought in for city use for streets and alleys and that sort of thing. Since we've had mild winters the last 2 or 3 years, is that something that you can save and store for the next year, or does it harden and you can't use it 1 year after the next?
That's a great question, because just last night at City Council, we about 9 months ago, we applied for and received a grant. We were one of about, I'm going to estimate 10 communities in the state that got the full funding request to build a salt storage shed. So you might have seen, I think ODOT has theirs out on maybe Lyric Lane.
Yes.
To cover their salt. Makes a lot of sense. But we applied for an EPA grant, which one of the things that, other than the fact that the rain reduces the supply, the other thing that it does is it gets that salt everywhere. Basically, it can get into the the river, it can get into the ground around it, and so the coverage is going to help us not lose so much, and it's going to help the environment as well. And so, to answer your question, yeah, we would see this year we wouldn't probably see as much of a reduction in what we had because it didn't rain as much, but there is some loss. That site should be built this fall, and it will be over there at Rennick Avenue, which is where we currently store it. So pretty topical. It's something we wanted for a long time, and we got a $75,000 grant for it. In terms of the types of things and the size of grants we've been getting lately, 75 almost doesn't feel so big, but that means we're only going to have to, out of pocket, go about the same. So 75 out of pocket, probably, and 75 with the grant. And that'll be something that we'll use for a long, long time, something we've needed for a long, long time.
To conclude our interview, if you've been with us throughout the whole thing, a lot of what we've talked about this morning involves money. As this year is ending down, you're submitting a budget to City Council for the next year. What do you foresee as far as any major increases, or is it going to stay pretty much what it has been, other than the contracts you mentioned?
Yeah, so the increases we'll see will be in salaries. Otter Spetnagel did a budget report last night. Finances remain pretty strong. Like you said, the hardest thing to account for is making sure that we're able to maintain staffing when there are salary increases. One thing that has gone well since about 2020 is our health insurance costs. We've been able to keep those relatively low after several years of double-digit spikes before then. And so that really helps when your insurance isn't going up double digits along with pay. But other than that, I think we're going to try and maintain staffing levels. One of the things that I think is biggest on the horizon for the city that we don't have legislation for right now, but is necessary, is our facilities. We've got the old municipal court where council chambers is, and then we've got the city hall. Both of those buildings are frankly in disrepair. And both city council and the administration building need new homes. So I think that will be the source of future planning before long.
All right. Good to know that we're keeping an eye on our dollars.
Absolutely. Always.
Chillicothe Mayor Luke Feeney, our special edition guest today here on Litter Media Live, brought to you by Adena Health System. I'm Mike Smith.